Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Lisa Falsko. I'm President and CEO of the Alaska World Affairs Council and the Norwegian Honorary Consul for Alaska. And it is such a pleasure to have everyone joining us today. Welcome for this breakfast happy hour, depending on where you are in the world, tuning in. Discussion about problems and solutions north of the 60th parallel. This program is in partnership with Alaska Startupweek, a week-long event filled with panel discussions, virtual open houses, day-long seminars, and so much more. Yesterday's events included programs on managing your online presence, funding your startup, and a virtual tour of Kodiak Island Brewing Company. For more information about Alaska Startup Week, go to alaskastartupweek.com. The Arctic is a fantastic, magical place with so many entrepreneurial investment opportunities. If you're an investor who wants to know more about business opportunities in the Arctic, an entrepreneur curious about prominent and Alaskan and Norwegian problem solvers, someone who is interested in fascinating innovation in Alaska and Norway, or you simply want to learn something new, today's program is for you, and we're so happy you joined us. Here in Anchorage, Alaska, it is 15 degrees. It's brisk outside. That's -9 degrees Celsius. The air is clean, and I hope you have clean air and water wherever you are around the world. Please say hello to us and to our speakers in the chat room and let us know where you are today. If you have questions and would like to ask one of those, just type it into the Q&A button at the bottom, and our moderator will get to that at the end if we have time. Siobhan Choi is serving as our production technologist technician today. So if you have any problems, type a question into her and she'll get you fixed up right away. The World Affairs Council is part of 95 councils around the United States, and we welcome everyone to listen and join in the conversation. A special thanks to all of our members, our supporters and partners like the Juneau World Affairs Council, who make programs like today possible, with a special shout out and thank you to the Consulate General in San Francisco, the Norwegian Consulate General, for supporting today's program. We have many other programs. If you are new to the Alaska World Affairs Council, and this is your very first program that you're tuning into, I hope you join us again. We're going to be back here Thursday, which is in a couple days, with a star-studded cast of leaders of the Air Force. So we have the Secretary of the Air Force, Secretary Barbara Barrett. We have JBEAR's Alaska Commander, General David Crum, and from Space Force, General Stephen Whitting, the Commander of Space Force Operation, with a special guest moderation by Ambassador Paula Dobriansky. So join and find out what the Air Force policy and practices and plans for the Arctic is. That's on Thursday. Registration is open for everyone, and you can do that online. At this point, I'd like to turn over the microphone to a special person who will be introducing our speakers and all of our panelists today, the Norwegian Consulate General from San Francisco, Yu Schlettbach. Yu, over to you. You have to unmute first.
Here we go. There we go. Thank you, Lisa. And it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you to you and the whole team at the World Affairs Council in Anchorage. I had the pleasure in 2015 to be there with His Majesty when we did a meeting there. So I know how good you guys are. And again, you're putting on a good show for us. So thank you. We're proud to be part of your team. Let me go right to it because you don't want to listen to a diplomat speak. You know, a diplomat's someone who thinks twice before he says nothing. So I'll get to the fact of the speakers. Sindre Bornstein has a passion for innovation and sustainability. Holds the role as Chief Commercial Officer of Yxney Maritime. It's a young company working towards sustainable maritime industry by using data-driven solutions for emission reductions. Before joining Yxney, he worked at the Norwegian Foreign Service, and I had the pleasure to work with him, among other things, on His Majesty's visit to Alaska. So Sindre is no newcomer to Alaska. And he was both in San Francisco and he's been in Guatemala. He has a background from Statoil, Norsk Hydro, working with business development, both internationally and on the Norwegian continental shelf. And he holds a master's in economics from the Norwegian Business School. Piper Wilder, founder and CEO of 60 Hertz Microgrids. Company develops software to maintain microgrids from village infrastructure to ocean-going vessels, to resilient microgrids on critical infrastructure. Wilder has came to Alaska to serve as Deputy Director of the Renewable Energy Alaska project in Anchorage. She has become there acquainted with the opportunity and challenges of project development, finance, and maintenance of remote power grids. Piper has previously been the Vice President of Amatis Controls, an Internet of Things company. There she developed a thermal metering product line. During this time, she was also named Aspen Magazine's 10 Women of Aspen. Piper holds a Humboldt Fellow and worked at the Economic Institute in Berlin for several years and authored several papers on the siting of utility scale renewables. She now lives in Anchorage with her husband and daughter. Isaac Vanderburg is the CEO of Launch Alaska and fund manager for Launch Alaska Fund, $3 million fund that invests directly in some of the accelerator cohort companies. Isaac has worked with hundreds of early stage companies and entrepreneurs responding to Alaska's food, water, transportation, and energy challenges. Previous roles include State Director at the Alaska Small Business Development Center and Operation Director for CRISPA Group, now Afina Holding, and Import-Export in Philadelphia that specialized in trade between Delaware Valley and Chile. He completed the Energy Executive Leadership Program at the National Renewable Energy Lab in Golden, Colorado, as well as Energy Innovation and Emerging Technology Program at Stanford. Isaac sits on the board of Commonwealth North, Greenstead Organization, South by Southwest Pitch, and led the Energy and Energy Efficiency Subcommittee and the Carbon Pricing Subcommittee of Alaska Climate Action Leadership Team under Governor Walker. In 2019, Isaac offered testimony on the role of energy innovation to the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. And he's played 4 years of NCAA Division I soccer, served as a Peace Corps volunteer in El Salvador. Now, Kristian Bye is the Director of Innovation Norway in Silicon Valley, which is part of our team, and I'm very happy to work with Kristian here in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And Innovation Norway contributes to sustainable growth and export for the Norwegian businesses through capital and expertise. And the offices abroad comprise of most promising companies in their ambitions to scale in international markets. Kristian is a director here at the office, and it collaborates very closely with the other Nordics, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Iceland at the Nordic Innovation House. Kristian has 18 years of experience from the Norwegian advertising industry, has co-founded and excited from a successful solar light company, and has supported over 200 startups as a mentor and business developer before joining the Norway Innovation in 2020. So basically, this should be not just a star-studded, you have the stars to do the conversation for today. And Bradley, I'll turn it over to you to moderate today's program. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Well, I am super excited to have our panel here gathered around me on Zoom today. The vision of this was to just begin a conversation about this home that we share up here in the Arctic, and the title of this is North of the 60th Parallel. And the reason I draw that distinction is there is a lot of territory of this planet that is above that parallel and is out of the Arctic, and I think that the two companies we'll be looking at today, as well as the two different ecosystems centered in that region, will have some interesting lenses for us to look at development. So with that, I want to start with our two companies, 60 Hertz and Yxney. Am I saying that right, Sindre?
Yeah, that's perfect.
And I want to understand, because both of your companies share a common mission, it seems like, to a new green economy and decarbonization, which is something new economically for this region. So I just want to hear openly a little bit around your stories coming to work on those two great visions up here. Maybe why don't we start with you, Sindre? Tell us a little bit about Yxney.
I'd be happy to. Hi, everyone. Yxney Maritime, what we do is we help ship owners and energy companies in their offshore activities to reduce their emissions and to really make that transition from the old way of operating into a low carbon industry. And the way we do that is we've designed a software which ties together these stakeholders in the market and really gives them all a platform for having a more informed dialogue on how they can reduce their emissions as a system. So it's a software as a service company, and it's really a B2B company working specifically towards the maritime industry and the oil and gas companies. My entry into this was 2 years ago after I left my posting at the Consulate General in San Francisco, like Joe mentioned in the intro, having worked with Norwegian businesses in Silicon Valley and really trying to understand the scalability of tech startups and how that scalability can be used for doing good. And I joined the Yxney team as a very early employee and have this sort of commercial responsibility in that company. And what I can say is that sort of on the client side, what we're doing that might be relevant for this forum is that we've specifically targeted companies that operate out of Norwegian headquarters. They operate globally as ship owners, but they have their home base here in Norway. And that was a really deliberate strategy from our end, because in the segment that we work in the offshore sector, the vessels operating out of this home market is amongst the most advanced in the world. So it's really a bellwether market. And yeah, so I'll just leave that there as that might be sort of a point that I'll come back to in this discussion on sort of the homes in the Arctic.
Yeah, Piper, do you want to tell us a little bit about 60 Hertz and how that began?
Sure. This is a delight to be with everyone this evening. For some of you, I appreciate that most of us have dark backgrounds. As the light is either left early or slow to come up this morning. It's of course one of the best times of winter in the Arctic. I can't get enough of the lavender light everywhere, and good to see so many colleagues and friends in the audience as well. 60 Hertz Microgrids is a software as a service company. It's a SaaS. Our primary customer base are utilities and microgrid developers or operators of very, very remote power systems. So as many of you are probably aware, microgrids are all over the Arctic. A microgrid is a mini electricity generation system that typically would serve a village or a remote industrial site, a mining operation, oil and gas, or even a fleet of distributed telecom towers. I came to this problem space because upon moving to Alaska, had never heard the word microgrid, even though I've spent my career in renewables, and was really concerned about how we might pay for remote renewable energy that could offset diesel dependence that we know across the Arctic is such an issue. And so as I was following this idea, this vision that we could aggregate investor capital and aggregate a fleet of remote projects, it seemed that there would be an opportunity to create a fund. But very quickly, investors in that prospective fund said, you've got a maintenance issue. We don't want to place capital for these fleets of wind turbines and solar panels and hydro projects until we know that you can shore up this maintenance question. And so with the great gift of naivete, I thought, no problem, we'll just find a maintenance software on the market and bring that to our prospective sites. And after sitting through something like 15 software demos from prevailing competitors, we realized that the big gap in the market was that there weren't companies offering a solution that worked in low bandwidth, and namely a solution that also would apply for people that were relatively untrained, either in technology or on the asset that they were maintaining. And there are a variety of other gaps that we thought we could do better on too. And so, again, with this gift of naivete, at that point I had two friends helping. Isaac, I'll never forget the coffee that we had together at SteamDot, and you were just getting going, starting Launch Alaska. And I thought, hey, there was something to the 60 hertz idea, and of all great gifts, Launch Alaska was able to provide us some seed capital upon applying and being accepted into their early cohort about 9 months after this vision started growing for me. So anyway, we're now in our 4th year, just into our 4th year down the road, have customers not only across the Arctic, but our first customers in sub-Saharan Africa, contract with USAID in Latin America, and are expanding this vision, the lessons learned in maintenance activity from Alaska to places globally that have microgrids and are learning how to optimize and extend the life of these critical pieces of infrastructure. So thank you for the chance to share.
Thank you so much, Piper. And maybe that is a good segue to both of you, Isaac and Kristian, in terms of talking about ecosystem and support systems. There's a variety of names for them, startup communities. In the spirit of being good Alaska guests, maybe I'll start with Kristian and ask, what that has meant in your work with Innovate Norway.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'd like to draw on both some sort of personal experience and say a few words about my current job. So first of all, for those who don't know it, Innovation Norway is a state-owned company and a national development bank that is supporting startups and businesses through capital and expertise to expand in a sustainable way. And part of that is having offices in today some 30 different locations around the world to support Norwegian companies who wish to expand globally. And an important part of that is, understanding your market niche. And I believe coming from Norway and having a lot of companies starting up in the Arctic regions, you automatically gain expertise from the environment you grow up in and from the problems you observe in your daily life. And I think that's the best innovation usually comes from people who live and experience the environment they start innovating from. So we have a large number of companies that we support, but also a large number of clusters that are gathered together with different companies within the same sector that collaborate in order not just to develop one company's market, but to see the whole sort of infrastructure and ecosystem around some of the bigger challenges we have. I got to know Innovation Norway, actually. I just started in Innovation Norway 3 months ago in August, but I got to know Innovation Norway coming from some of the same background, I would say, as Piper mentioned. I started a company back in 2011 that was developing a solar lamp and phone charger for the sub-Saharan African market. And being out in the environment that you develop a new product for and connecting with the customers and really understanding the environment where your technology is has to deliver, that was a huge experience for me, and also a proper test of bringing technology to the harshest environments. I got a lot of support from Innovation Norway back then, and really saw the value of creating a network, both on the governmental side, but also on the private sector, in order not to walk alone, but have strong support with you. And I think that's what Innovation Norway is about, is not just to help individual companies, but to put together several players that can benefit from each other. And when it comes to the northern regions, I have limited sort of personal experience in developing companies there, but returning to my initial point, I think to understand the niches and appreciate the competency that comes out of observing and seeing the issues where you live and where you start your company is really valuable, and it's easy to transfer to new markets where that competency is appreciated.
Thank you. Isaac?
Yeah, So thanks, Bradley, for having me this morning. Also, I just wanted to acknowledge that our organization operates on the lands of the Dena'ina peoples, and so all of the work that we're doing depends on and is in partnership with our friends in the Dena'ina community and tribes throughout Alaska. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. I think I can give a little bit of an overview of Launch Alaska. I'm really excited also, given the time that we have remaining here, to jump into some of the kind of compare and contrast between Alaska and Norway, because I'm candidly really interested to learn more about some of the differences between the two places. But Launch Alaska, it's great to have Piper on. She's really kind of a poster child and has kind of blazed a path for the kind of companies that we hope to work with. And the way that she ended her segment there is exactly the kind of thing we're trying to drive, where we're looking for companies that work in Alaska, find an opportunity to deploy their technology and learn from Alaskans that are, as Kristian's saying, most intimate with the problems that they're trying to solve. But then from Alaska, launch to much larger markets, and it's been really exciting, kind of watching Piper's trajectory as she did a lot of work, as she talked about, interacting with folks all throughout Alaska and having very targeted customer interviews and really designing her app from the ground up to cater to the needs of rural powerhouse operators. That information was incredibly valuable to, I think, the early development of her app. And then she's used that to, have really a competitive advantage when she goes to other markets. Her kind of user-based, user-driven design is turned into a real competitive advantage. And so, just plus oneing what Kristian was saying there, I think what a place like Alaska, and it sounds like Norway, offers is the ability to have real intimacy with a problem set that matters to places throughout the globe. And certainly our program has been really evolved over the last few years to focus in on that very special thing, connecting startups from anywhere to asset owners and utilities and folks who are running some of the physical infrastructure and some of the food, water, transportation, energy systems in the state. Make that connection happen and see the magic that comes from those connections. So really, at the end of the day, even though there's a lot of details and a lot of planning, and a lot of coordinating, our organization is really a big matchmaking organization, where we treat the startups like adults, put them in front of folks that could be their customers one day, and really use the Alaska partners as subject matter experts to tell us whether there's a there, and whether the company has something that's actually useful to their community or to their piece of infrastructure that they're running. And so I'm really excited to talk more about kind of compare and contrast between Norway and Alaska. But thanks for having me here, Bradley.
Thank you so much, Isaac, and thank you as well for the land acknowledgement. It's easy to forget inside of Zoom that we are still somewhere on this planet. So I want to note to the attendees as well that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your window, and I have certainly enough questions of my own here, but I want to make sure that I give some voice to some of yours as well. So I'll try and save a few minutes at the end. I want to come back, I think, to some of the fundamental business issues, first of all, with having a company this far north. I've heard it expressed in different ways, but the pull of capital, perhaps, for Seattle here in the United States, and Berlin and other places in Europe, it can make it easier to start a company where there is a concentration of that. So I'm curious, from both of you, Piper and Sindre, if you ran into challenges, of funding or of other resources in your journeys, and how you resolved those, what those were. Maybe start with you, Piper.
For sure. So 60 Hertz picked the venture path right off the bat because of our business model as a B2B SaaS. It was a good fit, and I like raising money, so I didn't think it was going to be, or I should say, I liked raising money before I started doing it with venture capitalists. And as Sindre and Kristian and Isaac know, yeah. But it's gotten a lot better, especially as our company has grown and we have more traction to stand upon. So we've raised in the seed round last year, closed 1.3 million, and then prior to that had raised another 150 or so, and are back to market right now, raising more capital. And what I have noted is that especially early on, especially when the skepticism to confidence ratio is so out of balance, that being a female-founded sole founder company from the hinterlands of Anchorage, almost to a conversation, when people finally were willing to get far enough into the pits that they would say, well, you might have something here. We're pretty sure you don't, but you might have something here. Then by all means, leave Alaska. And so that, and I have listened to a point, you got to be open-minded to these things. Why are they saying that? And the concern had really been a talent vacuum. How are you going to hire the staff that you need? And then furthermore, investors feel that Alaska may as well be the moon. It's so far compared to a company that's in Silicon Valley, that an investor might want to swing by, might want to visit the office, might want to go chat with one of your customers. Gratefully, we had the confidence ultimately and support of Alaskan businessmen, and our lead investor is a utility here. And that leveled the confidence that enabled us to raise those early rounds and ultimately attract large capital outside of the state. And as we're going back to market now, as I mentioned, certainly finding investors globally, including in East Africa, and people that understand the problem space. I think it only takes now, I'm getting more practiced at explaining why the credibility of being headquartered in a place that is so close to a deep knowledge base about how to solve this overlooked problem set is helping. But I think it really is incumbent upon all of us too, ecosystem builders and those that care about activity in the Arctic, to also be cultivating and developing the kind of talent, the kind of investment, the kind of investors that we can pull broadly within our own network, as opposed to just trying to persuade people in Silicon Valley that Alaska really does have something to offer. The Arctic does have something to offer.
Right, absolutely. Sindre, some of similar challenges or different ones?
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Piper. That was interesting reflections you had there, and always interesting to hear how people experience that conversation with investors and the VCs. We've chosen a different sort of path, choosing to bootstrap the development of the company for quite some time. So we got we started in 2016, and we got an industrial investor in 2018. And that was really a way for us to open up a collaboration to secure the data access that we needed from the market, as much as the financial sort of need we had. So we've been bootstrapping, not chasing VC, but choosing to eat rice and noodles for quite some time. And I really want to pick up on what Kristian was saying about the Innovation Norway system. And I think this might be sort of be a relevant tag for the conversation as well, having these systems in the ecosystem as a whole that really applaud the young companies trying to do something new. And I think that Innovation Norway has a mandate to support financially young companies. But I think an equally important part of the mandate that Innovation Norway has is really applauding entrepreneurs and young companies, and really helping, giving advice, being there as cheerleaders, just helping you along, really encouraging young companies to take that risk, and really being the difference between choosing to do so or not doing it. So I really wanted to use this opportunity to say thank you to Innovation Norway for doing that. And we've had several sort of encounters with Innovation Norway, both as in the role as advisors and certain crucial times of the trajectory of the company, but also when it comes to financing of early stage development of the company. And that has been the differentiator, I think, between making it or not, and really has enabled us to delay going for VC money. But we're also sort of experiencing some of the same things that you were mentioning, Piper, now. We're talking to a lot of very nice people and trying to raise capital to fuel further growth. So we're sort of going into another phase of our development as a company, really trying to scale.
Thank you. Yeah.
I just want to volley back a question then. Is anyone aware, is there a pan-Arctic investor network? Because I think they would be people that would automatically understand the space and be more willing to invest in your company, if also mine.
I'm not really sure. Maybe you know that, Kristian.
I don't know about such sort of organization or structure, but I just want to add on to what you were saying, that with money comes power, and Innovation Norway surely is one of the most important sort of funders in the very early stages of companies in Norway, and sustainability has become an increasing important factor and criterion to receive funding, whether it's in the form of grants or innovation loans. And I think when early stage startups are challenged with their impact and their purpose related to sustainability, they sort of build that into their backbone, and it makes it easier for them to pitch that value towards more professional investor at a later stage. And it seems to me that more and more professional investors is really picking up sort of the glove and taking on the challenge to move money where it can actually do some really good and potentially improve the state of the world. And of course, that also is strongly related to, what kind of world are we going to have in the next 100 years or so. So I think there is movement in the right direction. And I think it's really important that the very first sources of funding, whether it's governmental offices or early stage angel investors, really emphasize the need to build sustainability into your business model and into your culture.
Thank you.
Can I please just add one comment to that? I think you're definitely right, Kristian, when it comes to being met with that sort of need for having sustainability ingrained in your business sort of strategy. And I really feel that in the interaction with Innovation Norway. And what we're seeing now in the interaction with professional investors is that sort of same impact requirements are being given to us as companies from investors, as professional investors as well. Bradley, you asked about the need to go to Berlin or other places to chase funding. I think in our specific case, it's a sort of maritime sustainability tech case. We do not see that need to go abroad to chase that capital. We see that there's an emerging, very professional base of investors in our home market that has deep insight into the industry that we're operating within. And really want to have that sort of partnership where the funding is more than funding itself. It's a really strategic partnership. And I think we're seeing that more and more investors are sort of targeting startups in their home market. And we're really seeing a broad professional sort of spectrum of investors doing that.
Yeah, and if I could just add to Sindre's comments, I also think one thing that's interesting about kind of Alaska and Arctic and some of these non-Silicon Valley, Austin, Boston communities, which have the dubious distinction of being referred to these days as like secondary communities. But I think one of the interesting things, one of the interesting roles that we have to play is that a lot of the companies that come through our ecosystems are hardware companies. Certainly, if you look at our portfolio at Launch Alaska, without us focusing on this, more than 80% of the companies that have come through our program are hardware. At their core, they all have some kind of software as well. But I think that it's a different kind of investor that invests in hardware. Some of the classic VC type funding that goes to the Pipers of the world, which is SaaS, software that is really tailored to that kind of Silicon Valley scale quickly, find multiples, isn't a great fit for many hardware companies when you're trying to build some, early physical product that needs to be prototyped and iterated on. And oftentimes there's huge capital expenditures to get into assembly or manufacturing. And so I think there's an opportunity. You're talking about some kind of a pan-Arctic investor network. I think there's an opportunity for other kinds of professional investors and other kinds of money to be financing the kind of companies that will grow outside of those tech hubs. And I think there's a really exciting opportunity there for sure. And some work I think already coming together around other kinds of investing that isn't the classic VC style investing. I would also just add that I feel like the money side of this is not the problem that ecosystem builders need to focus on. And what I mean is having someone like Sindre or Piper in a community is the thing that matters, and the money will follow if we have entrepreneurs that are have the capacity and the drive and the kind of risk appetite frankly to take this early stage company route. And if we can find those entrepreneurs, the money will follow. I think the funds will get formed. Even in Alaska, the small community that we are here, if you are a startup, there are a lot of people who want to help. I mean, we have companies coming through our program from some of those busy tech hubs outside of Alaska, and they're always blown away with like, why is everyone so friendly, and everyone, every door is open, and we can get to anyone in the state, and anyone will take a meeting with us, and they'll spend half an hour and they'll introduce us to 4 or 5 of their friends. That's the other side of that two-edged sword. Like, yes, we're a young ecosystem. Yes, we don't have really any VC funds, classic VC funds really in the state yet. Our kind of VC investor network is not built yet. But if you are a startup and you are an entrepreneur, there's a lot of people who wrap their arms around you. And I think the money will come. I think once you start having more Pipers and Sindres and more entrepreneurs, digging in and saying, we're going to stay in Alaska and there's a reason to be here because we're close to those problem sets, or we're close to the opportunities to get tech validation or business model validation, then the funds will come together, I think. But so we should focus more on entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I want to come back to the money, but I also want to look at another angle that Sindre touched on briefly, which was the less talked about part of this, and that's mentorship along the way. I think that there are a lot of companies, as you say, Isaac, that feel the support and the systems around them. And there's a lot of pressure, certainly to get the runway, to make the company work. But I'm curious, from your perspective, Sindre, since you brought it up, and jump in, Kristian, if there's areas that you feel Innovation Norway tries to focus on, but what aspects of mentorship are appropriate for these companies along the way? What do these companies really need?
I think I'll try to be specific with our case and our company. And first, let me pick up on something that Kristian mentioned earlier. It's understanding the market niche. And I think an important aspect of our company is that we're sort of building on an industry that's been very, very important economically for our country. So we're sort of following 40 years of industrial development in the maritime industry in Norway. And so we're building solutions on that. So there's a lot of competence in Norway in the maritime sector and in the energy sector. So when it comes to mentorship, we have really received a lot of mentorships in the dialogues with our potential clients and partners, and really just sparring with actors in the market that we know do good stuff, and really building solutions in partnerships with people around us. And that industrial ecosystem has been very, very important for the development of our solution. So that's sort of one angle on it. And I think another angle is something that you, Isaac, mentioned. I think you mentioned intimacy. I think you mentioned it in relation to problem set, but I think also intimacy in the Arctic countries when it comes to intimacy between people and trust between people, and really having a smaller ecosystem than sort of the big tech bubbles or tech capitals. You know the people you're talking to, you know of them. You sort of have a trust-based dialogue from the get-go, and I think that's really, really important, and so, really a benefit. Talking about sort of benefits being based in Anchorage or in Oslo that we can draw on. And a third angle to it is what I mentioned with having governmental systems such as Innovation Norway. Just their mandate, the government-given mandate, is to cheer startups along. And I think that's just fantastic.
Kristian, how do you do that? How do you cheer startups along?
Yeah, well, I think partly it's the process of sort of qualifying the startups from the get-go as they apply for support, funding, or advice. You really have to sort of prove your case before you're taken on board, and that sort of means that you're a prioritized company that we believe in as soon as you're sort of included in any one of our funding programs or programs. When you're seeking market opportunity, and especially abroad, like companies approaching us we put together our tech incubator program called TINK, and we pull on the local resources that are the best in their fields in order to prepare the companies that we take on to really understand their product market fit and understand this market well and how to approach it. So that is an important part of it. Another potentially even more important part is the network we're building and maintaining and expanding, because as soon as you get a company with a very specific need, I talked to one today within the field of drones to monitor grid, the electrical grid, and analyze the data return from that. That is a small niche, and then it's about expanding our network and finding the experts within various fields and make those introductions that connects the company directly with local expertise here in the US. And as I see it, the stronger the passion and the purpose is with a company, the more welcoming a mentor will be, because they understand this is not just about another company who wants to make a buck. It's about a passion-driven company who's really aiming to make an impact. And I experienced this firsthand when I started Bright Products. We were a small solar startup with a tiny little lamp, and I called directly to Alf Bjørseth, who was like the guru of solar energy in Norway. And immediately, he picked up the phone, he invited us to a meeting, and he shared all his knowledge and experience and network with us. And I think that is mainly due to the fact that we came from sort of a passion and purpose-driven company. We knew nothing about the off-grid market in Africa, and by showing that vulnerability and inviting people to be a mentor and not just a bouncing board for your ideas, then I think you can really get somewhere. And I think that is a huge potential for companies working with solutions for the Arctic regions, because you normally come with a passion and a purpose that people want to become a part of it. And we in Innovation Norway try to identify those people and also try to train the companies to appreciate and express that passion and that purpose.
So just to follow up with that, is there a way that you maintain and build that mentor network, or does it happen organically for Innovation Norway?
It happens quite organically. I would say we've been on the ground here. How long is it now? For all in all some 30 years in different forms and shapes, and you know, the mentors that we use in our programs have followed us for several years. They enjoy working with Norwegian companies, and by, you know, maintaining those relationships, it's also easier for them to invite us to conversations with other potential mentors. So, you know, relationships are not built overnight. You need really to establish strong connections with a few people, and then when there's trust and friendship sort of established, it's easier to expand from there. So that's actually, on a personal note, my biggest challenge now is, you know, how do you expand your network and get to know people when you're only on Zoom? So that's going to be interesting to see how post-COVID will potentially grow our networks through different channels and methods. But I certainly hope that we'll get back to, you know, the coffees and the occasional drinks.
Isaac, do you have any thoughts on that? How has Launch maintained operations in these times?
I can talk to that. I just really quickly also wanted to follow up on the mentor topic. Would love
Please.
to hear Piper's thoughts. Our organization ourselves have moved around from a quote unquote mentor program because we found that it was tricky to find individuals. You know, if we go out and we say, okay, these 40 folks are our quote unquote mentors, and we knight you to mentor our companies, that by the time you bring companies in to meet with them, there's a lot of times not a great match between what the companies actually need and what the mentors can offer. And it's tough to do that until you actually have the companies in the program and you understand what their problems are or their needs are. And so that's, you know, largely why we've kind of moved more towards, rather than quote unquote mentors, trying to just right off the bat establish potential business relationships and match asset owners or Alaskans that have needs that we think the companies can cater to, and let that drive the relationships that get set up, rather than it being a kind of mentor structure. Try to find relationships where there's actually a value exchange, and where they're talking about doing business together, or they're sharing, they're both passionate about the same problem, and they're both trying to wrap their heads around the same problem. It just feels like that's the more valuable thing for the startups, and that's kind of why we've reshaped the program the way that we have. And I'm forgetting your first question, but Piper, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I just want to dive right in on that point, because I want to reframe this. I'm not sure it's as much about mentorship as social proof. Mentorship is within that, but this concept of social proof for a young company is so critical that no one wants to take a risk on you, but somehow if they can be led to believe that someone they respect or admire has already believed in that company, vouched for them, or somehow if the customer says, well, who's someone I know that made the same leap of faith and landed safely on dry land, that's really the role of these ecosystem builders, is to provide the social proof. That can come through a mentor. I think that can come through contests. You know, the High North Young Entrepreneur Award is one that comes immediately to mind. We were grateful to receive several years ago. That there are ways the ecosystem can elevate the presence and the viability of a company. Things like demo days. I don't know if any of you have binge watched Indian Matchmaker on Netflix. My husband and I passed most of August that way, but it's this notion of knowing us in context, that being introduced in context is so fundamental in many of the ways that we assess and evaluate and appraise one another or our companies. And that's, I think, a great component of or contribution that the ecosystem builders can give young startups.
Yeah, and Sindre, you mentioned bootstrapping, so it sounds like you know, your experience and Yxney's experience around social proof might be a little different than Piper's. How has that been for you?
Yeah, again, it's interesting to hear your reflections, Piper, and I think our sort of experience on this was that we early on had found a good connection with one of the industry leaders, one of the industry leading ship owners based out of Norway, and really had a constructive dialogue with them around what we were trying to do. And they they really believed in us and what we were trying to do. And I think that passion that was mentioned here earlier, and that impact-driven sort of approach to trying to do something, I think they bought into that. And it's really been constructive dialogue that's been going on for years, really driving our product development and finding that need of the market through that dialogue with these guys that initially just believed the crazy ideas of a couple of guys with a laptop. So having that, that someone, or if it's a person or a system or a company or client or investor believing in that seed of possibility, I think that's super important. And for us as a company, that's it's been like that all the way. And without that proof from the clients or prospective clients, so building on that, I don't think we could have made it as a bootstrapping company. I think we would have had to seek investment much earlier, because that really led us to believe that we could make something happen with these prospective clients, being in these deep dialogues with them. And we built on that relationship and entered into contracts with them.
Yeah, that brings me back to something you were mentioning earlier, Isaac, when you introduced Launch Alaska, which were, the goals around transportation, food, and energy that drive your mission there. How have you managed to kind of connect those to market points, I guess, for your cohort companies, so that social proof goal that they're going after is the right one and they're not going after the wrong one?
It's not easy. And some really big companies with huge resources to throw at kind of ESG metrics are trying to crack this problem. We have someone on our team, Frances Ball, who is spending the majority of her time trying to figure out how we can help the portfolio companies in our program track ESGs and report on them in a way that is valid and undergirded by data, and also help us zero in on what ESG's environmental, social, governance metrics, for those of you who are familiar with the shorthand, which of those ESG metrics really matter to us as an organization, and out of the thousands that are available through some of the larger kind of clearinghouses of ESGs, what's the set of 10 to 20 that are really relevant to our program. And we are talking to some big companies who have their own ESG programs, and on the one hand, feeling good that they're also not sure yet how to approach this, and everyone is working through it, but also recognizing that that this is a challenge, and that investors, as other folks in the call have said previously, investors really are asking for this kind of information. They're asking companies to track and be aware of what their environmental, social, and governance impact is as part of their investment decision. And so I think it's incumbent on those of us who are trying to create ecosystems and support young companies that we're putting effort and time and money into thinking about this to help our companies along, and to help our companies develop their own approach to ESG. So I'll leave it there. We could talk at length about this, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm curious, Kristian, if there's anything, under the Norwegian government or more broadly across Europe, to encourage those kinds of synergies between perhaps social benefits that are coming from commercial offerings.
Well, it's certainly a huge challenge to find the right metrics and to follow up on the metrics for your sort of impact, so to speak. I used to work quite a lot for an impact startup incubator, and I think to have investors and the market in general to agree upon criterion to to track and trust sort of impact metrics is a huge challenge. But I think if the main investors lead the way and sort of define their expectations and challenge companies as to how they sort of, you know, deliver on a triple bottom line, or how they deliver impact beyond the financial aspect, I think that would be of great help to sort of somehow structure it and give it sort of a value or a way to measure it. Usually it's a very sort of verbal and soft area of metrics, but I think it would help a lot if within different sectors also the funding environment became more, you know, specific as to what they're looking for and how to measure it, and that there were more standards, so to speak, across the different funding sources. That might be a bit on the side to your question, but I don't know about sort of specific European initiatives that have captured this. I see the SDGs are very often used, you know, as you know, important guidelines, but rarely I see that it's broken down to something very specific for decision making and follow up when investments are made. It usually goes back to the return on, you know, classical investment.
Yeah, that brings me to one other topic I wanted to touch on with the panel, which is around those notions of ownership, equity, and exit. Those are common themes that come up for early stage startups that mean to scale. I'm curious, you know, from each of you, you know, your experience around money or ownership in the companies that you're involved in driving your decisions, or whether you've managed to find purpose-driven work and how that affects your decision-making in your companies. I can narrow that down a little bit more, but I'm trying to leave it as open as possible. You know, for you, Piper, do you imagine, I suppose, a future at 60 Hertz in 5 years or 10 years, or do you, you know, try to let that not, you know, play into how you run your company?
Yeah, so I think we're a Greyhound built to run faster on the track and retire early, move on to the next problems to solve. I am often puzzled by this notion of a serial entrepreneur, because from where I'm standing right now, if 60 Hertz is blessed and lucky enough to be able to exit in the next 5 years, as our financial model projects and that we certainly hope for, I just plan on laying down for the balance of my career, because this has been such a huge effort and so much work. Knowing who I am, I'm sure that I wouldn't lay down that long, but taking a long nap and getting enough sleep would be appealing. That said, I think what's interesting in the emerging social entrepreneurship space, where 60 Hertz falls squarely into it, is that there really is a lot of purpose and impact woven within this. I think our challenge is to help investors understand that that's not just like a nonprofit donation that they might happen to get some upside on, but that this is really a viable business model that many social entrepreneurs globally are seeing really make real returns. And I would argue, as the planet and as the world is looking for great levers for change right now, where questions about peacekeeping, even among such developed nations as we're living in, at a time when half of our country has been misled to think that the results of the election are unclear, the critical impact. If I want to say one thing this morning, it's that the international exchange and the business opportunities between our companies and countries are so fundamental. That is one of the most indissoluble planks in international peace, is getting to work with one another. Because if you have a business relationship, you're going to be far less likely to question. You'll have a network of people to reach out to, and then also to support one another at this unprecedented time, where peace is much more of a question, lack of corruption is much more of a question. And I think that's important to know for the World Affairs Council. I mean, we are all here because we believe in this kind of partnership and dialogue and exchange. And that's, I think, just a great opportunity that this organization and each of us individually can help strengthen and contribute to.
Thank you so much for that, Piper. And that is a question I would put to anyone who wants to take it up on the panel. If there are any areas of help or growth that you're looking for, to reach out for assistance, to Norway for us, and to better understand, what the problems are that we're trying to solve and what resources are available. Sindre, I wanted to come back and ask you a little bit more as well. The problem space that Yxney has chosen, clearly is a little bit different than the one that 60 Hertz is occupying. Do you see, that sort of work scaling to other places, other oceans, other ports around the world, or is it very confined to Norway and Scandinavia?
Oh, definitely. We have global ambitions, and it's been a conscious part of our strategy to start the business working with sort of Norwegian headquartered ship owners and energy companies, and then leverage that home base into expanding internationally, and using that, sort of playing the network effects to expand. And it's been part of our strategy all along, and we're embarking on a growth phase now, and we're really seeing this strong demand for ESG happening. And I just wanted to pick up on that quickly. And I think part of what we do in the software that we deliver is to give industry players a better understanding of their energy consumption and their emissions. And they give them an opportunity to communicate with the market around this. And I think this drive for ESG metrics, and not just metrics, but deeper understanding, is really driving a lot of cool innovation happening in the market now. And I would say that having an impact-driven startup is probably the smartest economics or best sort of value proposition that you could have. I would much rather being an impact-driven startup than a non-impact-driven startup, and it's not just because it gets me up in the morning and drives me and motivates me. It's also because it's a better economic business case.
Absolutely. And do you both feel like Alaska and Norway are places that will remain homes for your companies, or do you think down the road you may have to leave?
You're on the record here, Piper.
Promise not to hold you to. And the question's coming from a standpoint of, what could make this place better to stay? What can we do as an Arctic society to make this a world where the energy of these kinds of companies congregates?
Yeah. Well, yes, 60 Hertz, so far as I can see, it will remain in Alaska. As Isaac is winking at me, I do have, we go back to Colorado fairly frequently, and so I find both states my home at this point. But the beauty of the Arctic and the network, the people, the fact that you can stand in line at the grocery store and close a business deal, which has happened. This is one of the most beautiful parts of our opportunity in Alaska. I think just a brief soapbox, if you'll permit it. I think the state of Alaska is really confronting how we cultivate resiliency in our economy outside of the very robust oil and gas sector that has carried us forward over so many of the past years, let alone fishing, let alone tourism. And an important point I want to make is just that if we want to grow, let's say, the tech competence here, why is 60 Hertz sourcing tech in Colombia and the Ukraine? Because those are places that are known for having incredible coders and developers. But why shouldn't that be in the Arctic? There is no reason, given our long dark winters, that people wouldn't have just as exceptional coding skills. For the state to recoup investment in that would demand having a sales tax, would demand having an income tax, would demand having the scheme that would bring that investment back home to our state. We don't have that yet. And so there are certainly aspects of ecosystem building broadly. When we're talking about generational shift, what is Alaska known for? What will we be attractive for? This is the precondition for gaining and gleaning that level of turning our boat, so to speak. And that's, again, a much larger policy question. But for the near term, I'll just scale back and say I couldn't live without cross-country skiing and our Arctic winters.
Indeed. I want to be respectful of time here. I see we're coming up, and I want to allow a little time for closing here. Any remarks on living in Norway, Sindre, just on those lines? Is it home for you, and shall it remain so?
Yeah, it's definitely a home. I love to travel. I really want to grow with this company and expand internationally, but Norway will be home. And I really subscribe to what Piper was saying about the beauty of the nature, the unique Arctic nature. And one thing I think is personally important to me that sort of it's a magnet keeping me here is also what's happening now with the attention to oceans in Norway, and really that building on that strong history of coexisting with the oceans. And that is just, I think it's a part of our DNA, and for me, that's really part of being Norwegian, and that really brings me home, I think, or calls me home when I travel abroad. Yeah. So we'll be staying here as well.
Wonderful. I can relate to that with the snow outside. It's where I want to be as well. With that, I think I will pass us back to Lisa Falsko to take us out. It's been such a pleasure talking with all of you about this very important topic to me personally, and I've learned so much and hope to keep in touch and learn more.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bradley, so very much for moderating today's program. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here today at the Alaska World Affairs Council and Alaska Startup Week, and especially the Norwegian Consulate General in San Francisco for supporting our commitment to bringing quality educational programs to you and our passion to increase everyone's global competency. If you have any questions or suggestions for future programs or this program, send them our way. We are super excited to be bringing you programs virtually, and we have a lot of exciting programs coming up on our schedule, including our program on Thursday, where we're going to be talking with heads of the U.S. Air Force military leaders about the Arctic, geostrategic keystone of U.S. security. So please join us for that at alaskaworldaffairs.org. And thank you so very much to our panelists, Sindre, Isaac, Piper, Kristian, and our moderator, Brad. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day in Alaska. It was so fun to watch the sunrise behind you, Bradley. And for you in Norway, have a wonderful happy hour and evening. We hope to see everyone again soon. Have a great day.